The night sky was lit with the soft hum of the human ship as it cut through the vast emptiness of space. Inside the ship, Captain Ryland sat quietly, staring at the stars outside the window. His thoughts were focused on the mission ahead, a mission that seemed simple on the surface but carried a heavy weight. He was about to lead a small battalion on a rescue mission to an alien planet, where a powerful alien queen's daughter had been taken by a dangerous faction. Rylan had been chosen for this mission because of his experience and past connection with the alien royal family. Years ago, during a battle on a distant moon, he had saved the queen's daughter from a deadly ambush. She had been a child then, and he had promised her mother that he would protect her, no matter the cost. But that promise had haunted him for years, and now fate had given him the chance to fulfill it. The queen's daughter had been missing for months. Her disappearance had shaken the entire galaxy. No one knew where she was or who had taken her, but recently there had been a breakthrough. A secret transmission intercepted by the Human Alliance revealed that she had been held on an abandoned planet, far from the eyes of any military. The Human Alliance could not risk sending in a large fleet, so they had turned to Rylan and his small group of elite soldiers to get her back. Rylan wasn't sure how he felt about the mission. Part of him felt anger at the idea of someone taking the daughter of someone who had once been so kind to him. But another part of him felt fear of failure, fear of losing someone he had already failed to protect once. The emotions were hard to balance, but he knew one thing for sure: he would not fail again. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Lieutenant Harris, one of his most trusted officers, coming over the intercom. "Captain, we're approaching the planet. We'll land in approximately 30 minutes. Rylan took a deep breath, sitting up straight. He stood up and walked to the cockpit of the ship where Harris was waiting. "Any signs of resistance?" Rylan asked, his voice steady but with a hint of concern. Harris glanced over at him. "Nothing so far, sir. The scanners are clear." "That's good," Rylan said, though he knew better than to trust the scanners. The galaxy was full of surprises, and sometimes danger didn't show up on any sensor. He had learned that the hard way. The ship began to shake gently as they descended toward the alien planet's surface. Outside, the planet appeared desolate, an isolated world, far from the major trade routes. The surface was covered in barren deserts and rocky terrain. There were no signs of civilization, just a wasteland. It was a place that no one would want to call home, but that was why it was perfect for hiding someone away. As the ship landed, the crew disembarked in silence, each of them preparing mentally for the unknown dangers that awaited them. Rylan had assembled a small but experienced team: Lieutenant Harris, Sergeant Jensen, and Corporal Lee. They were all capable soldiers, and Rylan trusted them with his life. Still, the mission felt different from anything they had done before. This wasn't just about completing an objective. This was personal. "Let's move out," Rylan ordered, his voice firm. They had no time to waste. The team made their way across the rocky landscape, moving with a quiet efficiency. The air was thin, and the ground beneath their boots was uneven, but they had trained for environments like this. Still, Rylan's mind was elsewhere, focused on the mission and what lay ahead. They came across a small, hidden structure after several hours of walking, an old outpost, long abandoned. Rylan approached cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of life. There were no guards, no patrols. It felt too quiet, too still. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The team entered the outpost, their weapons raised and ready. Inside, the walls were cold and metallic, with only a faint light flickering from a broken overhead lamp. The place was clearly old, but there were signs that someone had been here recently. Rylan's heart skipped a beat as he moved further into the building, searching for any clue about where the Queen's daughter might be. In the back of the outpost, Rylan found a terminal. It was covered in dust, but still functional. He approached it, his fingers flying over the controls as he accessed the system. The screen flickered to life, displaying a set of coordinates. "That's it," Rylan muttered to himself. These were the coordinates that would lead them to the Queen's daughter. The team gathered around him, their eyes scanning the screen. "It's not far," Rylan said. "We move out now." They gathered their gear and prepared to leave, but as they did, a low growl echoed from the shadows. The sound froze Rylan in place. "Did anyone else hear that?" he whispered. Before anyone could respond, the growl came again, louder this time, followed by a series of loud thuds. Something was approaching. Ryland's heart raced as he signaled for the team to take cover. They quickly scattered, taking positions around the outpost. The noise grew louder and Ryland could hear the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, moving in the darkness. He tightened his grip on his weapon, ready for whatever was coming. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the room and Ryland fired instinctively. The shot missed, but it was enough to cause the creature to hesitate. He could see the gleaming eyes of the alien creature now, its form outlined against the dim light. It was massive, with sharp teeth and scales that glinted in the low light. It growled again, this time advancing toward them. "Get ready," Ryland barked. "It's a trap." The creature lunged at them, its claws slashing through the air, and the battle began. The soldiers fired in unison, their shots hitting the creature, but it didn't slow down. It seemed almost invincible, charging at them with terrifying speed. Ryland ducked behind a nearby pillar, taking a deep breath. He needed to think quickly. This wasn't part of the plan, but he wasn't about to let his team be overwhelmed. He scanned the room for any advantage, any weak point in the creature's attack. That's when he noticed something, a vent above the creature. "Jensen, hit the vent!" Ryland shouted. Jensen quickly aimed her rifle and fired at the vent. The creature screeched as the vent opened, releasing a blast of air that knocked it off its feet. It stumbled, giving the team just enough time to regroup and launch a coordinated attack. The creature was eventually subdued, but not without cost. The battle had taken a toll, and Ryland's team was left shaken but determined. "Let's move," Ryland said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We're not done yet." As they continued their journey, Ryland couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this mission than he had been told. Something about the way the creature had appeared, so suddenly and so fiercely, told him that the people who had taken the Queen's daughter were ready for them. But Ryland would not stop. He couldn't. He had made a promise to protect her, and he would see it through, no matter what. The mission was far from over, but Ryland was ready. Ryland's team continued their trek across the rocky, desolate landscape, the harsh wind biting at their faces. The heat of the sun was relentless, beating down on them as they pushed forward, following the coordinates from the terminal they had found. The promise of finding the Queen's daughter drove them, but the weight of uncertainty hung heavily over their heads. Each step brought them closer to an unknown danger, one that none of them could fully prepare for. The terrain was harsh, filled with jagged rocks and scattered craters that made navigation difficult. Ryland led the way, his boots crunching against the dry ground as he carefully studied their surroundings. His thoughts kept drifting back to the Queen's daughter. He had saved her once, years ago, and he had sworn to protect her. Yet here they were, on a new mission to rescue her again, and this time he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. The rest of the team followed closely behind. Lieutenant Harris, ever the optimist, had a steady focus. Despite the dust, the isolation, and the overwhelming odds stacked against them, he always seemed to maintain hope. Sergeant Jensen, tough and pragmatic, kept scanning the environment, her hand resting lightly on her weapon. Corporal Lee, the youngest of the group, walked silently, eyes darting around, unsure of what dangers lurked ahead. "We're close," Ryland muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon. The terrain was beginning to change. Ahead of them, the ground started to slope downwards into a large valley, the dark, looming structure of an abandoned complex coming into view. It looked like an old research facility, gray walls, broken windows, and rusted metal doors that appeared to have been long forgotten. It was a perfect hiding place, and something told Ryland that they were getting closer to the truth. The Queen's daughter had to be here. They approached cautiously, making sure to stay low, using the rocks for cover. As they neared the entrance, Ryland held up a hand to signal for silence. The wind had picked up, making it difficult to hear anything over the howling gusts, but there was something else in the air. A faint sound, almost like whispering voices, seemed to echo through the broken walls of the complex. Ryland's instincts told him that they weren't alone. "Stay sharp," he whispered to the team. "We don't know what's waiting for us inside." The team slowly made their way into the building. The door was slightly ajar, the hinges creaking as Ryland pushed it open. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with dust, and the air felt stale, as if the building hadn't been touched in years. Broken glass crunched under their feet as they moved deeper into the facility. The walls were lined with old equipment, some of it long since deactivated. The place had a sense of emptiness, but at the same time it felt strangely alive, as if something, or someone was watching them. They moved cautiously, checking each room as they went. The facility was surprisingly large, with narrow hallways that twisted and turned in confusing directions. Ryland's heart began to pound in his chest, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The silence was deafening, and his mind kept racing with possibilities. Who had brought the Queen's daughter here, and why? As they reached the back of the building, they stumbled upon a small control room. The room was dimly lit by a flickering screen that cast an eerie glow across the walls. Ryland approached it, feeling the weight of every step. He moved to the console, quickly accessing the terminal. The words on the screen made his heart stop. Subject, X-224, testing ongoing. Pending transport to designated facility. Ryland's breath caught in his throat. The Queen's daughter had been here, but there was more. The note indicated something far more sinister than a simple kidnapping. Whoever had taken her was conducting experiments. They had been experimenting on her. The thought made Ryland's blood run cold. Before he could process it further, a loud bang echoed through the room. The team immediately sprang into action, weapons raised. Ryland's eyes scanned the area, heart racing. But there was nothing. Just silence. Then a soft voice, almost a whisper, came through the comms. "You're too late." Ryland froze, his mind racing. The voice was faint, but there was no mistaking it. It was her, the Queen's daughter. She was alive. "Where are you?" Ryland asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the rising panic. "I'm not here," the voice said, a trace of sadness in her tone. "I'm somewhere else. They took me. They've changed me." Ryland's pulse quickened. Who took you, and where are you now?" But the voice faded, the signal cutting out. Ryland stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. He looked back at his team, their faces filled with confusion and worry. What had just happened? Who had been talking to him? The air around them seemed to grow heavier, and the sense of foreboding deepened. The Queen's daughter was still alive, but she was not the same. "We need to find her," Ryland said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming uncertainty. "We have to get to her before whatever they've done to her becomes permanent." The team moved quickly, retracing their steps to the entrance of the facility. As they exited, the wind howled louder than before, carrying with it the unsettling feeling of being watched. Ryland scanned the horizon again. They had no clear direction, no map, no way of knowing where the Queen's daughter had been moved next. "Captain," Harris called, his voice tense. "There's something else. Look at this." Harris held up a small device, a data chip of some kind. It looked out of place, tucked into the side of a pile of rubble near the entrance. Ryland took it from him, slipping it into a port on his wrist console. The data chip whirred to life, displaying a series of coordinates. "This is it," Ryland said, his voice firm. "This is where she's being taken." The coordinates led them to a hidden facility in the middle of a vast alien desert, a place no one had heard of before. It was the last place anyone would expect to find such a high-profile prisoner. It was almost as if the people who had taken her wanted her to disappear completely. As Ryland processed the information, a terrible realization settled in his gut. This was no ordinary mission. The Queen's daughter wasn't just a pawn in a political game. She was a weapon, something they had been planning to use for something far more dangerous. They had to stop them. They had to get to her before the experiments turned her into something unrecognizable, something that could destroy everything they had fought for. The team made preparations for their next move. As they gathered their equipment, Ryland couldn't shake the nagging feeling that time was running out. Each moment spent searching felt like an eternity, and the stakes only grew higher. As they set off toward the coordinates, the wind picked up again, howling like a warning in the distance. It seemed like the planet itself was trying to keep them from uncovering the truth. But Ryland couldn't turn back. Not now, not when they were so close. The Queen's daughter was out there, and he was going to bring her back, no matter the cost. The harsh winds of the alien planet howled as Ryland's team marched toward their destination, the coordinates still fresh in their minds. The desert stretched out before them, vast and unyielding. The planet, once barren and empty, now felt like a living, breathing entity, one that was warning them to turn back. But turning back was not an option, not when they were so close. Ryland had come too far. His team had sacrificed too much, and the Queen's daughter was still out there, lost somewhere in the depths of the desolate world, a prisoner of forces beyond their understanding. The journey had taken a toll on them. The sun was relentless, the terrain unforgiving. They had been walking for hours, the oppressive silence of the desert broken only by the occasional crackle of the wind and the sound of their boots crunching against the dry earth. Each step felt heavier, each minute longer than the last, but there was no choice. They had to keep moving. They had to reach her. Rylan glanced back at his team. Lieutenant Harris was holding up well, as always, his face set in determination. Sergeant Jensen, always the realist, was scanning the horizon, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion in her movements. Corporal Lee, the youngest, was trying to hide the fatigue in his posture, but Rylan could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, the way his eyes constantly darted to the surroundings as if expecting danger at every turn. "We're almost there," Rylan said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but inside he was battling his own fears. They had come so far, but the danger was just beginning. The mission had already taken a turn for the worse, and now, with each step closer to the facility, the reality of what they were about to face settled in. Ahead of them, a massive structure loomed in the distance, a compound hidden deep within the heart of the desert. It was a place of shadows, a place that no one had ever been meant to find. The facility seemed to rise out of the ground itself, its walls dark and foreboding, almost as though the building had grown from the very earth beneath it. It was a place that seemed designed to keep secrets, to hide the truth from prying eyes. Rylan knew that the Queen's daughter was inside, but he also knew that this wasn't going to be easy. The mercenaries who had captured her were skilled, and they had made it clear that they were willing to do whatever it took to keep her under their control. If they had truly experimented on her as they suspected, she might not even be the same person anymore. The thought of what she had endured made Rylan's stomach churn, but there was no time to dwell on it. He had a job to do. They all did. They approached the entrance to the compound cautiously, staying low behind the dunes and rocks. The place was heavily guarded, the perimeter lined with armed sentries who patrolled the area with military precision. Every movement seemed calculated, as though they knew exactly where to look, where to watch. It was a fortress, and getting inside was going to be a challenge. "Ready?" Rylan asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. He didn't need to ask. He could see the determination in their eyes, the unspoken resolve that bound them together. "Ready, sir," Harris replied, his voice calm. "Let's move," Rylan ordered. They moved in a coordinated pattern, sticking to the shadows and using the cover of the terrain to hide their movements. Rylan led the way, his instincts guiding him as they slipped past the sentries. They had to be fast. Every second counted. The facility was vast, and getting through its perimeter was only the beginning. Once inside, they would have to deal with whatever experiments the mercenaries had been conducting. The thought made Rylan's heart race. He had no idea what kind of weapons or technology the enemy might have at their disposal, but he knew one thing for certain. They weren't going to make it easy for him to rescue the Queen's daughter. As they neared the compound's main entrance, Rylan motioned for them to stop. The door was heavily guarded by 2 sentries who were standing motionless, eyes scanning the surroundings. There was no way they could get through without being seen. "We need a distraction," Jensen said, her voice low and steady. Rylan nodded. He had already anticipated the need for one. "Lee, you're up. Take out the left sentry." Lee didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, blending into the shadows as he crept toward the left sentry. In one smooth motion, he dispatched the guard with a single strike, the sentry's body crumpling to the ground without a sound. "Now, Harris, right sentry," Rylan commanded. Harris wasted no time, his sniper rifle steady in his hands. One clean shot, and the second sentry collapsed, falling silently to the ground. With the guards out of the way, Rylan signaled for the team to move forward. They slipped inside the compound, the interior dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. The air inside was cold, sterile, and silent. It was a far cry from the chaotic, tense atmosphere outside. As they made their way deeper into the compound, Rylan's mind raced with questions. What had they done to the Queen's daughter? What experiments had they subjected her to? And most importantly, where was she now? They passed through several empty hallways before reaching a large set of steel doors. Rylan's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. They were so close. The doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing a large room beyond. Inside, they found rows of medical equipment, machines that hummed quietly, needles and vials lined up neatly on counters. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, but what caught Rylan's attention was the figure in the center of the room, the Queen's daughter. She was standing in the middle of the room, her back turned to them. Her long, silver hair cascaded down her back, and her once gentle features were now hardened, almost unrecognizable. She wore a tight-fitting suit, her body trembling slightly as she stood motionless, as if waiting for something. "Her," Rylan whispered, his voice thick with emotion, but before he could move, a cold voice echoed through the room. "You're too late," Rylan froze. It was the voice of the warlord who had been behind the Queen's daughter's capture. The mercenary leader had been watching them from a control panel, his presence unknown until now. "We've been waiting for you," the warlord continued. "And now you will witness the power she's gained, the power we've given her." The Queen's daughter turned slowly, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Her once kind expression was now replaced by something darker, something more powerful. She didn't speak, but her gaze was enough. It was as though she was no longer fully herself. Something had changed inside her. Rylan's heart sank. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. The Queen's daughter had been altered, transformed into something more than human. And now the real battle was about to begin. "Move out!" Rylan shouted, but the command came too late. The Queen's daughter stepped forward, and the very ground seemed to tremble beneath her. She raised her hand, and a powerful surge of energy shot through the room, knocking Rylan and his team off their feet. "Get up, now!" Rylan shouted, but it was clear that the battle was only beginning. The team struggled to regroup, the Queen's daughter standing in front of them, her powers unimaginable. She was no longer the helpless girl they had come to save. She was something else now, something more dangerous. "We have to stop her," Rylan said, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let her become their weapon." The real fight had begun, and there was no turning back now. The air inside the compound was thick with tension as Rylan and his team tried to regain their footing. The Queen's daughter, or what was left of her, stood in front of them, her eyes glowing with an eerie light, her body emanating a powerful energy that seemed to distort the very air around her. She was no longer the frightened girl they had come to rescue. Something had changed within her, something dark and powerful. Rylan could feel it, a coldness in the air, a force beyond his understanding. "Don't shoot!" Rylan shouted, holding up a hand to stop his team. His voice was tense, filled with urgency. He had no idea what had happened to her, but he couldn't bring himself to harm her. Not like this. She was still human, wasn't she? But the creature standing before him was no longer the same. The way she moved, the way she stood, it was as if she had become something else entirely. She wasn't just altered. She was a weapon, and Rylan knew that whatever was controlling her would stop at nothing to turn her against them. "Stay back," Rylan ordered his team, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. He could see the faint flicker of recognition in her eyes, but it was buried beneath the power that had been forced into her. She was struggling, but the warlord's influence was strong. The Queen's daughter didn't speak, but her presence was enough to send a chill down everyone's spine. She raised her hand again, and the energy in the room grew even stronger. The walls trembled as the power surged from her, sending waves of raw energy crashing into the group. Rylan's team staggered back, struggling to maintain their footing. This was no longer a simple rescue mission. It had turned into something far more dangerous. The stakes had shifted from saving her to preventing her from becoming a weapon of unimaginable destruction. "Please," Rylan said, his voice hoarse, his heart breaking at the sight of the girl he had once sworn to protect. "Fight it. You're stronger than this. You can fight them." Her glowing eyes flickered, and for a moment Rylan thought he saw a glimpse of the girl she used to be, the girl he had saved all those years ago. But that moment was fleeting, and the power that surged from her grew stronger. "Get back," the warlord's voice echoed through the room. His presence was now felt in every corner of the compound, a cold, calculated force that had been controlling her all along. Rylan looked at his team, knowing what he had to do. This wasn't just about rescuing her anymore. They couldn't let her become the warlord's tool. But how could they fight her? How could they stop someone who was once a person, now turned into a weapon? He turned to his team. "We need to get her to the extraction point. We can't do this alone. We need to find a way to break the control over her." Sergeant Jensen's voice was calm, despite the chaos unfolding before them. "If we don't do something soon, she'll destroy everything." Rylan nodded. They had no choice. They had to act fast. The longer they waited, the stronger she would become. "Lee Harris, cover us. Jensen, you're with me. We need to get close to her," Rylan ordered. His voice was steady, but the weight of what he was asking them to do was not lost on him. He wasn't asking them to fight an enemy soldier. He was asking them to face a person they had come to know, someone they had hoped to save. And now they had to stop her before she destroyed them all. They moved as one, their steps synchronized, their focus sharpened. Rylan kept his eyes on the Queen's daughter, watching for any sign that she was still there beneath the darkness that had overtaken her. He could still see traces of the person she had been, the gentle, kind girl with the smile that had once lit up a room. But that was a lifetime ago, before the warlord's experiments had twisted her into something unrecognizable. Jensen moved quickly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a device that would allow them to disrupt the warlord's signal. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was their best chance. She worked quickly, her fingers moving with practiced precision as she activated the device. It hummed to life, sending a pulse through the air. Rylan could feel the pressure around him shift as the energy that had surrounded the Queen's daughter wavered for a moment. The glow in her eyes dimmed just for a second, a fleeting moment of clarity. But then the power surged again, stronger than before, and the Queen's daughter took a step forward, her face now completely transformed, her features twisted in an expression of anger and confusion. "No," Rylan shouted, his voice desperate. "Don't do this, you're still you. You can fight this, you have to." Her eyes flickered again, and Rylan could see it, the briefest flash of recognition. She hesitated, her hand hovering in the air, but then the warlord's influence pushed back, forcing her to raise her hand once more. The power that radiated from her was overwhelming, and Rylan could feel it. He could feel the pull of the warlord's control, dragging her deeper into his grasp. But Rylan wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not when there was still a chance to save her. "Jensen, now!" Rylan shouted. With a quick movement, Jensen activated the device again, sending another wave of interference through the air. This time the power didn't just flicker. It collapsed. The Queen's daughter staggered, a strangled gasp escaping her lips as the light in her eyes dimmed further. Rylan rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached out, his hands trembling as he grasped her shoulders, steadying her. She was unsteady, her body swaying as she fought to stay upright. For a moment it seemed like she might fall, but then her eyes met his and he saw it, the girl he had saved all those years ago. "You're okay," Rylan whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You're safe now, we're taking you home." But the moment didn't last. The warlord's voice came again, cold and mocking. "You think you've won? She is mine, and she will always be mine." Rylan turned sharply, facing the control panel at the far end of the room. The warlord was watching them from a secure location, but Rylan could feel the weight of his presence. He had no intention of letting the warlord win, not this time. "Get her to the extraction point," Rylan shouted. "We need to move, now." The team rushed into action, with Rylan guiding the Queen's daughter toward the exit. She was still weak, but she was herself again, at least for now. The warlord's influence was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but Rylan refused to let go. He had promised to protect her, and he wasn't going to let her fall back into the warlord's grasp. As they moved through the compound, the walls shook with the sound of explosions in the distance. The warlord had activated his defenses, sending drones and mercenaries to intercept them. But Rylan didn't care. They would fight their way through. They had to. They reached the extraction point, a small ship hidden in a nearby hangar. The team moved quickly, securing the Queen's daughter in the back of the ship. Rylan climbed into the cockpit, his hands steady as he prepared for takeoff. "Let's go," Rylan said, his voice filled with determination. As the ship lifted off, Rylan looked out the window at the compound they were leaving behind. The warlord would not stop, but they had won. For now, the Queen's daughter was safe, and Rylan had kept his promise.